Hey guys, this is Shebs from Shebs the Wanderer, and this is another edition of 15 Minutes, where it's an opportunity for me to talk to someone else about their experiences on travel. I have got an amazing couple from New Zealand. They are currently expats in Dubai. So Sharon and Mike tell us their story about what it's like to travel with a family. So Sharon is a school teacher and teaches nursery, and Mike is a builder. They like to balance their travel life with home life as well. They like to do a bit of veggie gardening, diving, outdoor activities, as well as cooking and baking as well. And they want to go into full-time travel, and they were supposed to do this year, but with COVID-19 it's been postponed. So I get to find out what it's like as a couple with a family to travel. Hi, Sharon and Mike. Thank you for joining me. How are you guys?
Yeah, all good. Good.
Good. How's Dubai?
Hot.
Yeah,
Really
it's getting warm. The summer's definitely on its way, if not here already. So, yeah.
See, you've had the full quarantine in Dubai. What's Dubai been like?
Lockdown, it started in... I work in education. I'm a teacher, so it started for us end of February, and obviously we were in full lockdown by sort of like mid-March, I think it was.
Yeah, I had a look at it the other day because I had, for some reason, I need to look at it. I think it was about the 23rd of March. We went into full lockdown. But, I mean, full lockdown, I was fortunate enough that with what I do, we kind of were covered under an exemption through construction, so I worked through most of it. Just had to organise a few permits. There was a bit of a hiccup every now and then, just trying to reassess on what we could and couldn't do. But I mean, for me, work-wise, we've been able to work through parts of it. But yeah, I mean, hard to say. It also comes into summer, so normally this time of year it does get a little bit quieter anyway. But I'm sure other people within Dubai, everybody's sort of going through different
stages.
We're fortunate enough that we've got a villa. So it's got a little bit of dirt outside. So for the first part of it, we kind of spent most of it outside. I mean, we're having breakfast, lunch, and dinner outside before it got too hot. So it wasn't too bad.
Gonna say hello.
Oh, hey, hello.
That's Saf, the eldest.
So that's one of the girls you've got, and you've got another daughter, don't you, as well?
Yeah. She's hiding out in her bedroom somewhere at the moment.
And they're both what ages?
7 and 5.
Oh, so they're at a good age now, aren't they, where they can understand everything? And
someone's heard that she hasn't heard before, so that's...
Oh, hello.
Hello.
How are you? You okay?
Good.
Good. Well, I'm going to ask your mummy and daddy about how they both met. I don't know whether you've heard this, but where did you guys both meet?
So we were obviously working in a childcare centre in New Zealand and working on a building site next door.
I was doing my building apprenticeship at the time in my hometown of New Zealand, which is Mount Maunganui, so like I want to say a small beach town. Yeah. Probably not so small these days, depending on who you're asking.
Yeah, we met there, and we started kind of, I suppose, dating in obviously many years ago. Started dating in the town and ended up moving in together, and before long we were kind of thinking about what was next, travel plans and things like that. And I'd always wanted to come to the Middle East. It was always kind of a journey that I'd wanted to explore. And I headed over, started a job, and then Mike followed a year later. So I kind of got the kind of like the lifestyle started. We got our home, we got friends and things like that, and then a year later Mike followed out. So
met in my hometown, and that was probably another 4 years before you then decided that maybe time to have a look at something else. I got by for a year without it, and then it was a couple of months home for a quick wedding, a quick honeymoon, which was a very quick trip to the far north of New Zealand, which rained the entire time in a camper van in there. So that was us.
Yeah. So you obviously, this was around about 15 years ago, if I'm right in saying?
Yeah.
I moved over to Dubai in 2007.
And I came out in end of 2005.
In 2005. So it was a couple of years that you were apart.
Yeah, just over.
Just a couple apart, yeah. And
yeah.
So how did the travelling, was it you moving away for the first time? Is that how travelling started for you, or?
I grew up with my mum and dad in Papua New Guinea for 3 years, so kind of expat lifestyle, and probably that's where the seed was planted, perhaps, for us taking on an expat life. Then when I was 16, I moved to Honduras for a student exchange program, so spent 1 year there, and that was obviously where I kind of felt like I'd discovered who I was and what I wanted in life. So New Zealand was, don't get me wrong, I love New Zealand and it's home, but it's a very small place and it's very, very, very far away. And we wanted to see the rest of I wanted to see the rest of the world, and Mike fortunately was happy to join that train. So.
All right. And for yourself, Mike, was it from an early age, or was it the influence of Sharon?
I'd always liked the thought, I think, of travel, but never really sort of found someone else that was keen on doing it. I mean, I obviously when we met, I was a year into my builder's apprenticeship, so it could have quite easily been finish my building apprenticeship, get a job, and sort of stay home. Obviously, being in the South Pacific, Australia is close to your doorstep. The Pacific Islands are there, but any larger move from there is obviously quite expensive and not necessarily something that a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, in fairness, a lot of people we do know have travelled a fair bit, but it wasn't necessarily on my cards. But yeah, Sharon definitely has a massive influence on what we ended up doing, which has been awesome for me, because ultimately I just kind of pack the bags and kind of travel along behind and get, as long as I know the dates and can put in for my holiday leave, I'm pretty easy-go-lucky, I guess, when it comes to that part of it.
We did have a couple of trips together though. So definitely. Before the Middle East kind of came into it, we went to Tonga with my family. There was a family connection to Tonga, so we went there, and then we went to Fiji together, just the two of us. And I think probably that was a big trip. Yeah, that was for you, maybe where you could see further travel playing a big part of our life. Yeah. In the early days in Dubai, we explored locally a lot. Okay. So some of our big trips were...
We did sort of,
Jordan.
Spent a fair bit of time in Sri Lanka. There was a couple of trips. We were fortunate enough that Sharon's boss and very good friend had had property over there, so that obviously definitely helped. So we had a home base and we could kind of branch out from there. But then, like Sharon said, the Middle East for the first couple of years, Jordan, dive trip through to Egypt. Yeah,
skiing in Lebanon. That was a good trip. We got to see a lot of Lebanon on that trip, actually. And then sort of into Europe as well. We went, and we'd never been to the UK, so we went and kind of spent a little bit of time there. Spain, France was lovely.
That was France. That trip was when we found out, or obviously we had a little one in the wings, but hadn't arrived yet. But yeah, it was mainly around the Middle East, I guess. Quite local, close to home.
Oman's one of my favourite places to visit.
Yeah.
Each place can change you in certain ways, but the historical side of things, what was it that appealed to you? Was it the cultural, the people, the food? What was it that sort of appealed to you both?
All of the above for me.
All of the above.
Yeah. Okay, speaking personally for me, I love Jordan. Jordan's one of my favourite, my favourite place to visit. And I think it's the history. It was a very outdoors trip for us. We spent a lot of time hiking, walking. We didn't go to sort of like the coast too much. We just spent a lot of time in the mountains walking. And like in Petra, for example, there were 3 days where we were just walking around and honestly, like completely off the beaten track. There were no tourists around, meeting people like that were semi-nomadic, I would say, and just stopping for a cup of coffee or a cup of tea, I think it was, a cup of coffee or whatever it was. And, just I suppose the generosity, the friendliness, the level of friendliness, that's what I loved about Jordan, and the landscape. Like, it's so vast. You've just got I think you look at the mountains and you look at the the geography, and you just think, how? Like, so many questions. So, yeah.
Me, as far as kind of the reason for which place, I don't necessarily think the food, the culture. I mean, I think it's the same with Sharon. It kind of is all of the above, and then just basically being open to whatever comes along on that trip. I mean, again, with the trip in Jordan, I think the other nice thing about it was just so easy. You know, we decided that we'd pick up the rental car just outside of Amman, just so we didn't have to have the hustle and bustle. But from there, it was just so easy to get around, and you could take it at your own pace. I mean, we had a couple of things that were semi-booked, but then whatever happened in between kind of happened in between. So, yeah.
You mentioned rental cars there. I actually I went to Jordan and did the exact same thing. I hired a car, and it was, I think, the first day that I went on like this. I was in Amman. Have you driven in Amman where it's so hilly? It was ridiculous.
I don't even think we went to Amman.
We flew in and we got
Madaba.
Yeah,
we went to Madaba.
Okay.
And we basically got a car straight out, and then the only other time we kind of went anywhere near was when we got the flight out.
So was it difficult driving in the city?
It was. Just imagine, for example, the rush hour where it's like 4 or 5 o'clock. Is meant to be 2 lanes, and there's about 4 cars in 2 lanes, and you worry about, because I'm obviously driving in the UK, you know, there's no such thing as people cramming you, but literally there was like hundreds of cars trying to get through, but you just somehow managed to do so. And then the scariest part was, I think for me it was scary, but for the locals driving, it probably wasn't, where I was on the highway or the motorway, as we call it, and I was in lane, and from nowhere 2 cars came at me like that, and it was just like, and I thought they were going to hit me, and then I sort of beeped, and they just sort of, the guy behind who went in front of me was like gesturing, saying, you know, what's wrong with you and stuff. But it was obviously, it's not something that I'm used to, but it was really scary. I thought, I'm driving at like 70 miles an hour thinking, I'm going to crash into these guys, but that's how they drive, and it's.
Yeah.
I mean, it was an experience. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone that's not driven outside of their country, where there's road instructions and stuff, and there's rules. But it's an experience. What do you think of Petra and the Al Khazna, the temple?
This is 10 years ago now too, so it's kind of going back a fair way, but. We had a mission that we would get there before everybody else, so we left. I think it was like the moment the area opened, we went straight in.
Yeah.
And we were there. Obviously as the moment you kind of walk around through the walkway and into that amazing big space, then it's phenomenal. But then we moved on pretty quickly from there, and then went to explore the other areas up in the mountains, and that's where we did a lot of the trekking.
We kind of, when we looked at what we were going to do, it was literally get down, spend the night, spend the day, and then head on back out, because we then had the next set of accommodation booked. So kind of like, because of that limited time period. But it was the way we kind of had a look at the itinerary. I think, again, with Petra, we sort of thought 3 or 4 days, wasn't it?
Yeah.
After 2 days of doing Petra, we actually decided to take the day off and backtracked on ourselves to somewhere that we'd seen on our drive down, and then did that trek that day as well. But, I mean, yeah, as far as getting around, I think the other good thing is that if you do a little bit of exploration around it before getting there, there's obviously so many different paths you can take. So if you do have a couple of days, do the main sort of walk, tick whatever boxes you wanted to tick, and then from there maybe have a look at a couple of the other routes and tracks that you can do for a different perspective.
Whilst you were travelling, you found out that you were pregnant with your first child, and so were you planning it, or was it just one of those things?
Yeah, we were. Yeah, we planned it. We we just thought it was the right time.
We were also travelling at the time because we were going to a wedding.
Yeah.
So we kind of piled in that trip around someone else's wedding. So kind of slightly different edge to the wedding for you. But
France with no cheese and no wine.
Does travel have an impact on your love life, on relationships? it's obviously amazing that you guys both met, and you know, you're both into traveling and doing things together. My concern sometimes is when if I got with someone, and it's probably why my relationships have sort of never worked, is having that person that's going to do the same, or has the same sort of, I'd say, outlook in life. And then the other issue is, for me, in my mind, is, let's say if I had kids, would that stop my traveling for good and stuff? So when you were planning having kids, was it definitely going to be part of, traveling was definitely going to be part of your life, or did it just sort of think, right, let's see how it goes?
I honestly don't remember thinking, or it never even kind of coming into my mind, or, you know, sort of like dawning on me that it might stop our travel. I think we just naturally assumed that it would just, things would continue as normal. Obviously, when we first had each of our babies, we didn't travel a lot in that first year. Although I'm saying that, I travelled with a 4-week-old back to New Zealand, and that was a pretty long trip. But you know, we didn't do those trips to new places and things like that. So no, it didn't. It never for a moment for me was a question of one or the other.
I mean, I don't think having the kids, or even thinking about kids, or when obviously after we've had the kids, that it would ever affect our travel. In fact, it's probably pushed that a little bit further, because we kind of also realised that, I mean, and again, one thing we have learned is that things are always up to change, but obviously also the start of having the kids is, at what point would you like to be in a place that you then settled down, that the kids then need to have a schooling environment. So we also kind of thought that maybe the start of the kids, if it is going to change anything, it may give us a time frame of when we might need to be to wherever home it ends up, just because of maybe more their high schooling than anything else. But at the same time, with how things have progressed in the last few years, that even itself could be questionable, and whether or not that even actually has to happen. So, yeah.
And I think one of the things I've learned is that, you know, with all of these families that do travel around the world with children, there's a huge opportunity for learning in the environments that you're currently in. It doesn't necessarily mean that they need to go through the schooling system, so to speak, to get an education. So, there's probably the biggest pull for us that would bring us back to New Zealand, or bring us back to home, would probably be family, just, you know, cousins and grandparents and things like that.
Like, there's got to be things that you can't do, you know, you can't do that you were able to do prior. Obviously, lots of hiking, I'm assuming a lot of the kids and stuff, you can't really do dangerous stuff. How do you sort of plan it? Do you plan it for yourself, or do you plan it with them, or how does it work?
We kind of take it as it goes. I mean, for example, we've obviously taken them on ski trips, and kind of before we went was just looking into maybe ski schools. So at least there's a period of each day where the kids are with someone else that we can then shoot off and maybe, you know, explore a little bit more than what we could have with the kids. Again, looking in advance of whether or not you can find a babysitting service. So again, if we wanted to go for a dive for a day that maybe we weren't allowed the kids on the boat with us, then it's having that service there. It's probably doing a little bit more homework, but I mean,
do you know, one thing that I do look for in accommodation now is probably people that are not big hotel chains or anything like that, people where they're sort of like small family run, not even just family run, but smaller like Airbnbs and smaller kind of unique boutique style hotels where I can go, listen, I trust this person that's organised our accommodation, and maybe they'll be able to help us with the babysitting service as well. In most cases they can. We took, we went to Uganda last year, and we wanted to see the gorillas. But
my 40th.
That obviously meant we couldn't take the girls trekking up into the forest, so we needed to get care for that. So we actually took the girls with us, and my mum came along. We went to Zimbabwe and left them in Zimbabwe with my mum, who has a friend there, and then we went off for like 4 or 5 days. So there's kind of things like that as well, where we can...
We've travelled a lot with Granny. Fortunately, Granny is quite up to a bit of travel from time to time, so every now and then she'll sort of get in touch and ask where we're heading next year, and sort of see which ones she might want to come along on, so that certainly helps.
Both have got sort of stable jobs. and you can travel, do you have to sacrifice things within your social domain to sort of do these things, or is it with your jobs you're lucky enough to sort of still travel and and live a family life?
Working in education, I've got a pretty flexible kind of job. I just know that I need to take all trips and annual leave and things like that needs to happen in the term breaks, basically.
Yeah.
I don't get more annual leave than anybody else. It's only 4 weeks a year, so we always sort of have like this plan for 4 weeks of the year. What are we going to be? Where are we going to be going? And what kind of like where are our places in the world that we want to go and stay and see? And then for Mike, obviously, he also obviously he's a bit more flexible with your leave, probably more than anything else. You can take it whenever
I think in the last couple of years it's kind of tightened up just because of needing to make sure there's certain cover. A couple of years ago I did have a few restrictions on how long a break I could take at one time. But no, it hasn't really affected us too much. Again, it's just, I guess for us also, knowing and planning in advance, it's kind of nice to know during certain times of the year where you're going to, get a couple of weeks off and what you're going to do, and whether or not that is a summer, a bit of time on the beach or mountain skiing, or a European holiday, just checking out cities. And again, I think one great thing about being in Dubai is that 5 hours from here, 5-6 hours from here, encompasses such a large area. And again, you can get away for 4 days. You can disappear into a city for 4 days and just and have a good look around, whether that is with the kids or without the kids from time to time.
I mentioned in the intro that you're ready to begin full-time travel with the kids.
Yeah.
So what's the sort of plan with that? And were you planning on it this year before COVID happened, or was that what the plan was?
Do you know what it was? We'd been out on a diving trip in Thailand a few years ago now, about 3 years ago, and we were coming back in from this dive trip, and obviously it had a fantastic dive and feeling super positive about life. And I just started to kind of think, maybe we could do this long term, and what would that look like? And we started talking about it on the boat ride back in, and basically since then it's been like this progressive, dialogue that we've had about how it would work, what would we do, where would we start, and it's changed a lot. Our plans have changed constantly, and we plan to be leaving in 5 weeks from now, so July the 14th. We were supposed to be putting our backpacks on and heading off to Morocco, but obviously that's now changed, and we'll need to wait a few extra months until we can head off. But I was a little bit upset about it in the beginning and the impact that it had, but obviously ultimately we can just sort of push it back a few months. It's not going to change things. So,
and as you were saying, you were planning to do this in terms of financially. Were you going to be working as freelancers, or what was in terms of funding it? How did you go about that? With 2 kids as well, by the way.
Yeah. Luckily enough, part of working here in the UAE is you do have a gratuity scheme.
Okay.
I've been fortunate enough to be with my company now for coming up 10 years. So this plan originally was planned to be self-funded. Again, we kind of had a few thoughts in mind, but it was really self-funded, a bit of a time frame on it, but other than that, everything else is, and again, that time frame is part and parcel of what has changed.
Budget, so as well, we've got like a pretty strict budget in mind. We don't want to spend more than between $80 and $100 a day.
Okay.
So that will largely affect where we go. And Central and South America is somewhere that we've thought of would be quite sort of feasible in terms of finances. And but also we looked at doing some work while we're on the road, and that might be through
various different organisations, so something similar to WAFing or something like that. Obviously, with both of our backgrounds, we're fairly diverse in what we can do. We don't mind getting our hands dirty. So again, just reaching out when we finally get something in plan and kind of loosely based around that, which, something where we can sort of sit down for a few weeks, which obviously, again, that in itself opens up various different opportunities.
What do you think? I mean, I've been asking all of my guests, what do you think the travel industry is going to look like? Because it's had obviously a massive impact already on tourism in certain countries. Do you think it's going to be a few years before anything gets back to normal?
I mean, it's going to have an impact on it. And again, with a lot of the smaller companies out there, most definitely. I think you asked me that question 2 months ago, and I probably would have given you a completely different answer, because I guess everybody's thoughts on this is changing so rapidly simply because of how things are eventuating. I'd like to think it doesn't have a massive impact on it, because the amount of countries out there that rely so heavily on tourism. But I mean, I honestly don't know.
At the same time, from an environmental perspective, I think giving the time to the planet, giving the planet some time to kind of recover is maybe not such a bad thing. So if we can go out and find ways to still continue with tourism, but do it perhaps more sustainably, might be a positive thing. Yeah.
I guess we just have to roll with it. I mean, ultimately, where we sit right now, we don't have a precise plan in place. We're fortunate enough that, again, our travel plans is reasonably flexible at this point in time. Obviously, having the kids definitely will factor in on that. We don't want to hit the road too early if we're not overly comfortable with how things are sort of opening up. So it'd be nice to kind of at least sit back and watch maybe the first couple of months when things do start to open. Just to see how different. I mean, everybody's reacting to it differently. Every continent's reacting to it differently. Every country reacting to it differently. So, again, we obviously want to make sure that we're comfortable with it. Probably more so, obviously more so than we're doing it with kids. So we'll wait and see. Again, we're fortunate enough right now that we are in a position that we can give it a little bit of time.
Yeah. To finish off, there's a few fun questions that I want to ask you. So, so where would you say your favourite place has been so far? As a family, let's just say as a family first.
As a family, we went to Georgia in the beginning of the year, and skiing trip to Tbilisi, beautiful. I love Georgia. I thought that was a really, really nice trip.
It was one of those places that we only went for a couple of days between Christmas and New Year's, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Fortunate enough to get the start of the ski season. Been a while since we've been on the snow, so that was definitely one of those places that the area itself was one that we would like to get back to eventually.
Japan was really cool as well.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I think the hard thing is you're going to get every single country we've been to since we started having kids, because everybody knows every place is slightly different. I mean, Greece.
No, Greece, yeah.
The Greek islands with the kids was just amazing.
People.
Yeah, and the cool thing with the kids is that, you know, it definitely opens up a few more doors maybe than what you would sometimes get if you didn't have them. I mean, everybody loves it. You know? Everybody loves to say hello when you're walking down the road with a pair of kids, so it definitely helps.
And do the kids appreciate it as well? Are they old enough to sort of understand what travel's like?
Yeah, I think they are.
Yeah, I mean, they certainly seem to have a good time when they're doing it.
Yeah. And I do think that they realise how fortunate they are, because they've got cousins back home in New Zealand who have not travelled much at all. So I think that they know that. And as well, obviously, living in Dubai, we've got like a hugely multicultural kind of community around us all the time. School, our friends. So, you know, I think they realise that it's a special thing to have friends from all around the world and to have that kind of worldly outlook. So, yeah.
I remember when I first went aboard as a 6-year-old, and I was turning 7. I still remember that very fondly. So they probably will remember this, you know, when they hit their teens and when they get older. So it probably have a massive impact on them going forward. And what about as a couple then? What would you say was your favourite place you went together before you had the kids?
I still remember our first trip to Fiji.
Okay.
Whether it was because I got the bug at that time, or it was a pretty special trip for me. So that one always sits top of my list, but it's always hard. I mean, at the same time, the 40th last year to go to Uganda and do, well, we kind of tied that one in with our sort of real first African trip. So we did South Africa and then up to Zimbabwe. Fortunate enough to have a friend up there that we'd see So that was probably two of my favourites.
Yeah. I think probably Jordan. Like if I was to really pinpoint it, I think it would be Jordan. Yeah.
No, those are good choices, by the way. There's amazing places.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what would you say, favourite photograph you've taken abroad? So you've got some good pictures.
Got walls full of photographs. I love to take photos. There's one of my favourite ones, actually. He's had it put on his arm. There was a temple that we went to see in Sri Lanka?
Yep.
And like kind of these statues all lined up in a row praying, and that was one of my favourite photos. We've got this cool photo. I actually just put it on Instagram a couple of days ago. The camel with the pyramid, one of the pyramids behind it in Egypt, and that was probably another one of my favourite photos. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm kind of along the lines. I mean, there's just again so many. Couldn't narrow that down even to half a dozen. Obviously, we sort of starting to run out of wall space now, so kind of keeping files to one side to eventually kind of start printing them out and putting them up on display. So yeah, couldn't tell you.
We print a lot of pictures.
That's really it, really. You've told us a lot about yourself and what it's like to travel as a family, and it's given me sort of an insight on how you could have kids and still be able to sort of plan your life around exploring, really. I guess it gives me a bit of confidence if I was to get in a relationship and maybe have kids and get going. Just before we finish, you've got a website, don't you? What is the website?
Yeah, we're My Free Range Family. So myfreerangefamily.com, and that's the same on Instagram, My Free Range Family, and then Pinterest, and it's all brand new. I just started it, so we've been
the joys of lockdowns, giving her a little bit of time.
But I wanted to keep business accounts and keep my personal life kind of separate from that. So it's basically, I'm a teacher and I don't know anything about social media or building websites or anything like that, but I really enjoyed it, and I think it's given me a lot of confidence in terms of realizing how many people or how many families are out there and doing the same thing and traveling. So it feels like there's a really nice community of people out there doing the same thing and that are ready to connect. Sort of like a genuine community of people.
Brilliant. Well, Sharon and Mike, thank you so much for coming on. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you.
And absolutely. And hopefully we can meet. Our paths can meet one day. And
I'm sure they will.
On the travels, I'm sure we will do. And but again, thank you very much, and take care of yourself. Well, there you go, guys. That was Sharon and Mike and their two daughters. Fascinating insight on what it's like to travel as a family. That's it for another edition of 15 Minutes. I shall see you all very soon. Until then, goodbye.